What's up, everybody? So this is another one of those jumping back on the bandwagon episodes. I have been trying to do one of these videos, at least one video a week, and then I slipped, and then I got some videos out around the EOS R5, and then I skipped another week, and then I missed a couple weeks, and I wanted to talk today a little bit about, I guess you could say, jumping back on the bandwagon, so to speak. This is definitely a video in the sort of lessons learned shooting video category. So what I've learned in the last almost a year shooting video, and the first thing that I've kind of really learned is not doing it is a real, and then trying to get back into it is a real challenge. There's so many things going on. There's so much stuff I have to keep in mind when I'm shooting video, and how long a recording is, and all of this stuff that I have found that when I'm out of practice, even like 2 weeks, getting out and getting back in front of the camera, I miss things. I screw things up. I have a very hard time even just presenting, talking to the camera. I start having a lot of audible or vocalized pauses, and I don't normally do that. Like when I'm talking to a person in real life, I almost never say in the course of a conversation. I mean, maybe once or twice, but it's a very rare thing. It was something that I beat out of myself quite literally when I took debate in high school. And when I come back to shooting one of these videos, I find that I sit there and it's and I don't even want to say it anymore, so I don't start getting that vocalized pause into my head. And that's kind of why I haven't had a video for 3 weeks now. I've had this big gap, or 2 weeks now, or whatever it ends up being. Is I tend to hold myself to a standard. I know I've said before, one of the most important things that I've found when it comes to doing video or learning to shoot video is you can't theorize about it and think about it and try to hypotheticalize your way through it. You have to actually do it. You have to set the camera up, get the exposure, set up your lighting, dial in your settings, get in front of the camera and record. And if you don't do that, it just doesn't matter. You can think through all the complexity all you want, but until you have feet on the ground experience, regardless of what you're trying to do, thinking you understand the process, you might have knowledge about what you need to do, but you really don't have that practical understanding that's sort of necessary. And that's one of those things that I've learned over the course of the year is there's a balancing act that I hold myself to a certain standard. I want these videos to be presented in a certain way. I don't want vocalized pauses. I want the videos to be informative, etc. I don't want to, when I'm diving into something new, I kind of have an idea how I want the video to go together. And I actually shot a video to put up I built an Arduino-based camera controller that controls 2 different cameras. It allows me to do multi-camera shooting, and restarts the cameras automatically to deal with the 30-minute record limit that exists on most DSLRs. And I put this together and I started shooting a video, and I actually have 3 cameras rolling for it. I have it controlling my 2 5Ds for the primary video, and then I have an EOS M3 that's pointed at it that is my secondary camera that's doing my shooting the content close up on the desk as I go through and talk about the various parts in the electronics. And I shot this video twice, and I went through editing it twice, and every time I got to the end of it, I said, this just doesn't meet my standards, and I deleted it, and I went back to scratch. And that's why I don't have a video, haven't had a video, is I have this content. I know I can present it better. I know that I can make it, you know, more useful, more informative, possibly more interesting, and I don't know how to do it. I have the execution isn't meeting my standards, and I would rather, you know, this is the sort of the problem with the YouTube market, whatever you want to call it, the modern media even, is there's a position now that's very much produce or die. If you're not constantly putting up new content, then the YouTube algorithms are pushing your old content down. You're not getting picked up by what's fresh. You're not on the like recommended list as high, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, what that kind of means is if your focus as a content producer is to produce high quality, well-researched, well-presented, well-rehearsed content, you're kind of going to get drowned out to a certain extent by the people who are just vomiting whatever they want to produce as fast as they can vomit it and put it out there. And, you know, to compete, to produce a lot of good content. You could look at, say, for example, Linus Tech Tips, their YouTube channel. They produce really well, high quality production content 6 days a week, I think it is, 5 or 6 days a week. And it takes his staff of almost 30 people to, between writers and editors and, you know, videographers and all of that, to kind of put out that kind of content. And it's one of those things where I'm not saying you can't put out content or you can't compete or you can't do something interesting as a one-man show or a small operation, because you certainly can. There are plenty of channels on YouTube that are putting out a massive amount of really well-researched, in-depth content on a fairly regular, like either episode weekly or episode every 2 weeks kind of thing. And you know, they're doing it, and they're growing their subscription base, and so on and so forth. And it takes an absolute toll for them to do that. It is an absolute, you know, super difficult thing to run, you know, content out. For example, CN Arsenal was talking, they had a Q&A session, and they were talking that when they're recording their videos, they produce about an hour-long video talking about the history of various firearms, small arms from World War I. And, like, he was talking about Matthias, the primary presenter and researcher for that channel. He was talking about how they put a video out every 2 weeks. It's about a 2-hour video, and it basically takes him an entire week to do all the research for an hour video. It takes him about a week to do all the research, just sit down and read the content and organize a script for their episode, and a week to shoot it, edit it, and get it posted. And I find, as I've worked through various content, for example, I still haven't finished my Lightroom 9.2 ISO-specific default video because of how long it takes to produce the content, to do the work and research and testing. As I was getting ready to record that video, I realized I didn't quite fully understand something, and I had to go back and I had to do a whole bunch of testing, and then I got sidetracked on some other projects, and, you know, it's just, you have to be extremely dedicated to have, you know, to produce content regularly. At least if you're talking about wanting to produce high quality, well-researched, well-rehearsed content. It's real easy to just vomit something out there and not care if it's accurate or true. It's a lot harder and it takes a lot more time to, do a good job. And that's always the case. I mean, regardless of what you're doing, YouTube videos, photography, whatever, it's hard to do a good job. It takes effort. You have to put effort into it to do that. And that's kind of where, like I said, I come back to with standards is I have standards I want to meet. I might, I could be told by a lot of people that I don't need to meet those standards. I could do something that's lower quality and it would be just as good, and YouTube video people, blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to do that. I want to meet the standards that are, my standards for what I want to deliver. So with that said, I'm probably not going to have a video every week, even vlogs. Like, I'm not so narcissistic to think that I need to sit here and talk about some random topic every week. A big part, as I said in a previous one of these vlogs, a big part of these vlogs is for me to learn skills in shooting, presenting, and so forth, and for me to keep in practice. Because every time I stop for, even 2 or 3 weeks, it's really hard. I mess things up. I miss things. I have problems in the first 2 or 3 recordings of jumping back in. And so to me, it's really important to do these vlogs, not so much because I really think anybody needs to care about what I'm saying per se, but because when it gets to things that I really need to say or really want to say or really want people to understand, to communicate that kind of stuff, it becomes a really big challenge for me to do that effectively at a high or fairly high production value. So that's what what's been going on in terms of why I haven't had a vlog. So I got a couple of things I want to talk about in this vlog that I've run across, some interesting things. For instance, I don't know if it really matters, but I ran across, I have to give out mad props sort of to Blackmagic Design. So 3 months ago or 4 months ago, beginning of the year, at December, January area, somewhere in there, I switched from using an old copy of Adobe Premiere Pro CS6 to using Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve. And it's free. I'm eventually going to, buy a full version of it because I feel that it's worth supporting. It certainly is fairly decent software. But I ran into a problem with it when I started shooting. When I upgraded to 16.2, and so I shoot 2-system audio, I record all the audio in these vlogs on a Zoom F6 and 32-bit float, which technically I don't need to do, but it just is easy enough for me to do at the moment, and it works well enough that I don't, it's a little bit bigger file, but I don't really care that much. Compared to the video files, it's tiny. And then I record the video on a 5D Mark IV, and I've got scratch audio with the video, and I use the Zoom or the functionality in DaVinci Resolve to sync the F6's audio to the video using waveform / audio analysis. And when I upgraded to 16.2, I ran into a major bug where that no longer worked. The waveform synchronization, I could do it in 16.1, I couldn't do it in 16.2. And like I said, I got to give Blackmagic, pretty good props for this, because I sent an email to their support people, I got a response back within 24 hours, or probably even less than that, but I sent it fairly late in the day. They asked me for some sample clips to show, to show. I mean, I had video clips showing the difference, that it working and not working. They asked me to send some sample clips. I sent them a couple of small sample clips that didn't reproduce the behavior on my end, and they passed it along to the development team, to hopefully address the issue, to figure out what it is and address the issue in, the next update to 16.2, 16.3. For software that I didn't pay for, or I should say maybe haven't paid for yet, haven't decided to buy the full version, or the, whatever you want to call it. I have to say that was pretty good support on their case, and that's just one more thing where I look at it and go, that kind of warrants the paying, buying the full version, just to support companies that do that and operate that way. It really is a pretty nice thing to have. So that was Resolve. Let's see. I talked about doing the vlogs, standards, etc. I've talked about Resolve. Oh, I want to talk about lighting real quick. So I've been playing around with lighting. I've been playing around. A couple of these vlogs have had a slightly more dramatic, slightly less flat lighting setup. One of the things that really amazes me, I think, in some respects in video, and maybe it shouldn't amaze me, is there really isn't a lot of useful dynamic range. If I turn my fill light down more than about 2 stops, that side of my face just goes black. And granted, this is 8-bit video. I'm not shooting with a log profile. There's certainly things that I could do to improve the dynamic range to, something better than what I've got or what I'm getting. But it amazes me sort of from a photographic perspective, because I've done things in photography where I've had way more than a 2-stop difference, to not have that much, to have things where I want to keep the brightness at, no more than about 2 stops. 3 stops starts getting real kind of dark. And, I talked in a previous one of these, it was a non-review of a Dracast LED panel, about why I think it's really important to have a lot of control over your lights, a lot of control and flexibility, and be able to dim lights substantially, because it's not just a matter of, well, you don't have a lot of range to work with. And, there's a lot of things I probably could do to get more useful dynamic range. I'm not saying that the range isn't there, but it's just not especially useful to have, things completely black. And of course, part of this too is just I don't have a tremendous amount of experience lighting people. I'm not a person, I never was a people photographer. I didn't do street photography or photojournalism or portraiture or any of that kind of stuff. I was landscape and wildlife photographer, and so I kind of, didn't light people. I didn't light anything. I used available light to get shots of animals and landscapes. And so some of this is, of course, getting lighting done right. I've learned, I won't say a tremendous amount, but I've run into all kinds of interesting quirks and gotchas, especially like I wear glasses and they're supposed to be anti-reflective coating or coated, but anti-reflective coatings only go so far. And so I find that I'm very constrained on where I can put light without turning my glasses into a massive reflection. And even turn to some extent how much I can turn to the light with the camera the way it is, because you run into the angles and the camera. And so it really is, it's lighting people for video has become something that's more of a challenge than I really expected it to, or to be. And the range that I can run my lights at is something that I've, has become, and comfortably, not, again, positioning is some things, but the range of between that I can run my lights at to get what I considered okay looking lighting is extremely, it's a lot more limited than I really expected it to be. Even knowing that I'm shooting 8-bit footage, you know, with some kind of tone curve, even though I'm shooting the lowest possible tone curve or the flattest possible profiles that like I have built into the cameras without going to something specialty. And then with that out of the way, there's one last thing I kind of want to talk about briefly, and it's it's something I've also run into. So as a still photographer, I've never cared about T-stops. I've never cared. This is one of those weird things, and I really was going to do a whole vlog on it, but I think I could, it's not something I want to do an entire vlog on. It's not that long, and I don't want to get into the technical side of it right now. But as a still photographer, I never cared about T-stops. F-stops are what's important to me, largely because F-stops directly relate to depth of field. And even though depth of field is an illusion that has so many factors that go into it, there can be appreciable differences depending on the lens design between the f-stop and the t-stop of a lens. So you could have like a say T2.8 lens, but because of the amount of, you know, the coatings, the number of lens elements, etc., that might end up having to be like an f1.4 lens, or not an, well, for T2.8 it wouldn't be f1.4. That might end up being like an f2 lens or an f2.2 lens to be able to get enough light to hit that T2.8 t-stop. And if you don't know what the f-stop is, you don't know which depth, you don't have a reference to calculate depth of field. Now, you could always argue that you don't need that, you just use the t-stop. Depth of field isn't that accurate in the first place. And, you know, that's all true. But like I said, from a still photographer's perspective, I didn't care about shutter speeds largely because they were not fixed the way they are with shooting video. I could, you know, up the shutter speed or slow the shutter speed down to accommodate the variations in lenses. And I wasn't matching lenses. You don't cut between pictures. You have a picture, and you may have multiple pictures shot on the same place at the same day, etc., from, you know, like different cameras, but each picture is looked at individually as a picture, not as part of a bigger whole. Whereas with video, that's not the case. You can't look at each picture individually. Each frame is part of the next thing, and when you cut from camera to camera, the color, etc., needs to kind of match, or it becomes even more, you know, it becomes jarring. And so none of this mattered to me before I built this Arduino thing and was starting to try and have a setup to record vlogs and other videos longer than 30 minutes without having to awkwardly pause and restart the camera. So I had set this up. I have my two 5D Mark IVs, and one has a 24-70 f2.8, the other has a 24-105 f4, and the colors are different. Even though I have both lenses set to f4, the f4 is almost 2/3 of a stop darker, or at least 1/3 of a stop darker. It's noticeably darker. Getting that to match is, you know, there's a whole lot of challenge in there. And I never really appreciated that. And I don't think most sort of photographers or even single camera video shooters appreciate that. You know, it's not until you start trying to match the color and the picture between an exposure between two cameras. And of course, there's some room, there's some latitude. I certainly would have more ability to match things in, say, Resolve if I understood all of the color grading controls, which I don't yet. I'm very used to the sort of the photographic approach, and when I get in, you know, like I have in Lightroom, and when I get into trying to match things in Resolve, I just kind of like What does this knob do? It didn't work. Reset. What does this one do? It's not a real, you know, I've read the documentation, and it's really something that I think I'm going to just need to figure out sort of until it becomes intuitive and understanding, or, you know, intuitively understood. So, which raises an interesting question, the whole T-stop, f-stop, matched color lenses thing for me, which is, I really wish somebody made autofocus cinema-style lenses, or that Canon would produce. I mean, this would be ideal. If Canon would produce a thing that I could plug into the USB port on, like, the EOS R5 or the 5D, or, you know, any Canon camera, and have it drive a focus servo on a cinema lens. Because the problem I run into is, of course, the cinema people, they don't want autofocus. They want manual focus. And it makes sense. They don't want a camera guessing at what they want, what should be in focus. They want an intelligent human driver working focus. And that's fine if you have somebody behind the camera. But the problem that I constantly kind of run into is I'm doing these videos where I'm presenting, or I have something, you know, I have to be managing, juggling so many different things that autofocus is like hugely important to me. It's hugely useful because it's something that allows the camera to take that one thing. And I have found that the dual pixel AF and face detect on my 5D has been stunningly accurate and useful and good, and it has done a fantastic job. I've used it on every one of these videos, and as I've gone through editing them, I have not found an instance where it decided that my face didn't need to be in focus and focused somewhere else. So cinema lenses get you the whole matched color, matched exposure thing, but they're not autofocus, which makes, like I said, it really difficult for the lighter end, the lower end type, the lone wolf shooters to go out and shoot, because, you know, most of us are using still lenses, and with still lenses you run into the whole, you know, unless you're buying multiple of the same lens, you run into the whole, there are color differences over the generations in, say, Canon lenses. And you just have to deal with them. And so, you know, I guess that is what it is. That is a challenge. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this video up here. I finally have one of these coming in under a half hour. That's really impressive to me, I think, at the moment. But anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. If you liked this video or found anything useful in it, please consider smashing that like button. If there's something that you're curious about or would like to discuss, leave a comment below. I read the comments. If I can, I reply to the comments. If I you know, have, you know, understand or whatever, you know, like, please join the discussion. If you're interested in watching or reading content on DSLRs, cameras, etc., please check out my website, and travel and photography, etc. Please check out my website at pointsinfocus.com. And again, subscribe if you want to see more videos on this channel, or and you know, notification bell, all that good stuff, etc., etc. Again, thanks for sticking around and watching, and until next time.